Chilean President Sebastian Piñera calls for a cabinet reshuffle in a bid to quell protesters. Major Cuban airline cancels several international flights due to U.S. sanctions. Climbing on Australia's sacred Uluru Rock is permanently off limits. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from Mesa. Chilean President Sebastian Piñera has called for a major cabinet reshuffle in an attempt to appease a week of mass protests against inequality. The president also said that he plans to lift the state of emergency on Sunday evening, while the military has already lifted a military curfew on the capital, Santiago. Protests began over a hike in metro fares more than a week ago, but quickly turned into a wide rejection of the economic policies of Piñera's government. The official death toll from the clashes between protesters and security forces stands at 17 people, while more than 7,000 people have been arrested. The proposal for a constituent assembly is gathering forces among Chile's protesters. On Thursday, thousands of people got together in community assemblies known as cabildos to discuss the future of the country.
These are students, scholars and workers from the University of Chile. They are debating their role in civil disobedience and the start of a new era. This is one of the cabildos called by social movements to debate solutions to the crisis.
I think we will have to learn as a people. We have the will to learn and move forward in building a new country. This is part of a new road that the University of Chile is helping build, just like our constitution, which is a relic of the Pinochet era. So are our bylaws.
All by himself, the president now tries to materialize the economic measures he announced on Tuesday, and which, just 1 week ago, he considered to be absurd. What he doesn't know, or refuses to discover, is that on the streets and plazas, the only words people want to hear out of his mouth are, "I quit."
This is what we wanted to happen after 1988, but it never did. There needs to be a new constitution, the people demand it. We need to start the process now and listen to the people. For 4 years they have talked about the people, the citizen, the consumer, but everyone has come together against their lies, and I think that's incredible.
Students and scholars who specialize in human rights at the University of Chile set up a legal defense group, as they anticipate that state terrorism will increase. This bullet, found near the Students' Union, is part of mounting evidence.
We have a specific case of a person who was missing for 4 days. In the case of torture, we have found different cases in which citizens have been attacked with the goal of injuring them or punishing them.
Meanwhile, the number of victims as well as people's anger continued to rise. In this military base, a girl was crucified, but neighbors remained steadfast in their fight.
Hospitals and clinics have been overflowing with injured, especially people who got hit with rubber bullets or were attacked by police. They are firing at people's faces. These attacks are not meant to safeguard public order. Police and military have the goal of injuring or even killing people.
Every day, doctors ratify the growing number of murders, injured, and of signs of torture.
In emergency services, we have registered 600 people seriously injured after the protests, of which half of them had bullet wounds. These people are protesting peaceful, and yet this is their response. But what's worse is that their injuries are permanent, as at least 50 were left blind after being shot.
The voice of Victor Jara, the singer who was tortured and then shot dead in 1973, multiplies on the streets, and especially at night. Despite all the threats and violence, a strange joy permeates all of Chile.
To talk more about the situation in Chile, we are joined by journalist Marcela Villa, who has a background in the international relations and development studies and is specialized in reporting on human rights and Latin American politics. She's joining us from Santiago. Hi, Marcela. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi.
President Piñera has just called for the reshuffling of his cabinet. How are people on the streets taking this decision, and is this enough to halt the ongoing protest?
As you have seen, many people moved in Santiago, joining this protest about the rise. I mean, it started with the rise of transportation, but now it's a protest against neoliberalism itself. So you have people from different profiles manifesting in the streets. Overall, it's hard to define how people are taking this decision, but in general, people are happy to see a change. Nevertheless, this change is not enough to stop protests because it's just a change in people within the government, but not a structural change. Therefore, people are not seeing it as enough to stop mobilizing.
Now, we know you've been covering the protests for the past few days in Santiago. What are people's most important demand, and why don't they accept Piñera's concessions?
Okay, so there are many demands of people that we are seeing in the streets today. All of them are related to the implementation of aggressive neoliberal policies. So we can see, for example, the demand for fair education, for fair healthcare, the removal of the AFP system, which is the pension system here in Chile, which is completely private and based on individual savings. So you have many people that get to retirement and they suicide because they don't have enough money to live. Moreover, we have the demand for a fair income and also the demand of a fairer working hour, as we have seen the demand for a 40-hour week. Most importantly, people are also living maybe the rise of electricity, the rise of transportation, but also the tag for the highway and so on and so forth. Overall, the demand of the people can be summarized in two basic demands. There are the requests for the new constitution that implements structural changes that will stop the fostering of inequality in order to privilege social rights, and also the dismissal of President Piñera. So according to people, it's not useful that he changes the cabinet. He is the one that needs to dismiss. And the changes also that he proposed are not enough because they are still related to the neoliberal structure that created all this situation. So basically, he's trying to protect the private sector and to help it with state subsidies. For example, he proposed a rise of the minimum wage from 300 lucas, 300,000 pesos, to 350. And the state is going to pay what the private sector is not paying to his workers. This is not enough because people want a solution that prevents this kind of situations. Yeah. And because of this, they want a structural change and not subsidize.
Now, let's talk about the protest, the ongoing protest. The official death toll from the protest stands at 17 people being killed, while more than 7,000 people being arrested. Is the government taking any responsibility for the deaths and the arrest? And how did the government react to a possible investigation into human rights abuses by the UN?
Okay, related to the human rights violations, so far, there are different positions because we had a massive spread of disinformation and fake news. But of course, there are different types of human rights abuses that have been recorded, such as death, torture, sexual violations as well, detention, so on and so forth. And the government so far has not taken any responsibility about what is going on. And you can also see when mass media says that in Chile there is a lack of a curfew culture. So they are stepping away from this kind of violations. Nevertheless, related to the possible investigations from the UN, the government appeared calm about that. Even Piñera said that he will call Bachelet in order to have these investigations that are going to take place next week. And I believe this measure is taking place because Piñera is trying to rewash his position and appear a bit more democratic because of the decision of also leaving the military on the street.
Now, lastly, Marcela, what do you expect to happen in the next coming days? Do you think protests will stop, or do you think they will continue?
I think protests are going to continue because Chile is experiencing an historical moment, and people have clear that this is the time to fight for their historical demands. And so the duration of these protests, I believe it depends on the kind of measures the government is going to take. And maybe if a political figure is going also to carry the demands of the population. But although the media is trying to normalize what is happening here in Chile, mass media is currently saying that the situation is going to be normalized, everything is going back to normality. There are already protests that are going to take place next week. So I believe this is going to go on until the government is going to implement a real change for its people.
Marcela, we thank you so much for your time for Telesur English.
Thank you.
We have been speaking with Marcela Villa from Santiago on the current situation in Chile. We'll take a short break now. Don't go away.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en I.
Dot in the I. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back to From the South. Cuba's largest airline, Cubana, has canceled several international flights to Mexico and Venezuela due to the latest sanctions imposed by the United States. The cancellations are estimated to affect around 40,000 passengers by the end of the year and will lead to losses of about $10 million. Due to U.S. sanctions, Cuban airlines are struggling to buy accessories for their aircrafts and often rely on renting aircrafts from foreign countries for operations. However, the U.S. Department of Commerce said last week it revoked licenses of U.S. companies who lease aircraft to Cuban airlines, and it would reject future leasing applications.
The measure taken is an arbitrary measure to reduce the influx of tourists to Cuba, and that also tries to tighten the knot to try to drown the revolution more and bring more problems to the Cuban people.
Antiguans can soon purchase shares in the West Indies Oil Company, or WIOC, after the government took the decision to lower its stake in the corporation from 51% to 41%. This approach, according to the cabinet notes, would allow multiple owners of the WIOC shares to be sold rather than permit a single purchaser to gobble up all the shares that will be offered for sale. The system will be conducted via a financial institution. The decision was taken at a cabinet meeting on Wednesday. The promised talks between indigenous leaders and the government on a new decree to replace the one that was defeated by the uprising have stalled, but President Lenín Moreno has been talking to some other sectors.
The Ecuadorian government has met with various trade unions to discuss a new decree to replace the Decree 883, which was repealed after almost 2 weeks of protests. It also says it's talking to various sectors about its planned labor reforms, and it thanked the Ecuadorian Bishops' Conference, which together with the UN brokered the talks with the indigenous leaders of CONAIE.
We have congratulated the President for talking to the indigenous movement. In all negotiations there is give and take. Conceding is not losing.
Facing criticism for his role in repressing the protests, the Minister of Defense, Osvaldo Jarrín, appeared before the Foreign Relations Committee of the National Assembly. But he seemed unrepentant and criticized the universities that served as peace centers or refuges during the national strike.
We saw the role played by those universities who called themselves peace centers, but which in fact served as logistical supply bases for the protesters and other groups who committed acts of vandalism. We cannot discriminate, but there were a lot of protesters who caused public disorder.
The rector of the Catholic University says their job was to protect the physical integrity of indigenous families.
The 5 universities roundly reject the minister's accusation. What we did was provide humanitarian aid, food and medicine, because there were many people injured. This was independent of any political ideology, but using military language to code these logistical bases, the minister has really crossed the line.
CONAIE says it wants to move ahead with talks with the government, but says its members, including its president Jaime Vargas, are still being persecuted by the government. And they too condemned the actions of the ministers of defense and the interior.
I repeat, we are not in talks with the government. The United Nations are acting as intermediaries, and we will respond to them. We will respect the agreements made to end the strike, but we have not had direct contact with the government or any minister. We maintain our demand for the resignation of the ministers of defense and the interior, but the president will have to decide that.
The government insists that there was a deliberate plan to destabilize the country and tries to belittle the huge popular mobilization. CONAIE says it is preparing a report on the abuse of human rights by the police during the protests. The ombudsman has raised the number killed to 10 and now has the job of investigating the circumstances of each of these deaths.
During the closing campaign rally of the Frente de Todos party in Argentina, presidential candidate Alberto Fernández once again questioned the neoliberal policies applied by President Mauricio Macri.
We have had 4 years of worries in Argentina. We have seen the closure of 43 companies per day. Between retirees or the banks, we choose the retirees. Between public education or the banks, we choose public education. Between public health or the banks, we choose public health. And between the workers or the banks, we choose the workers.
And the vice presidential candidate Cristina Fernández de Kirchner stressed the importance of the upcoming vote on October 27th.
This is not just an event to say empty words so that you vote for us. We are not that. We are here as part of the Frente de Todos because we are men and women who have convictions. We are closing a historic cycle for a country that will never again fall into the hands of neoliberalism. We want to avoid more pain for Argentinians. That's why we are together today, to say never again to these policies. Never again.
Presidential elections will be taking place this Sunday in Argentina. So, what are the challenges the new government will have to face? Our correspondent Edgardo Esteban explains.
Art and culture can reflect the people's needs. Humor can serve as an alternative platform to denounce the social and economic crisis in the country, but also to build hope by looking forward to the future. Journalist Pedro Saborido talks about a possible way out for Argentina.
It will not be easy. Things are not going to go back to how they used to be from one day to the other. The level of destruction done by Macri has been very high, but there is no other way than to try.
According to the latest opinion polls, this Sunday may change the political future for the country. But how the reconstruction of Argentina will look like? There is a lot to be done since neoliberal policies have left Argentina with one of the highest poverty rates in its history.
We'll have to start from zero. The country will need the help from the whole world. The country will have to start with the most urgent of problems, hunger, so people will be able to feel hope again and to live in a country full of challenges, but also full of opportunities for everyone.
The new Argentine government will also have to find ways to help other Latin American countries overcome their economic and social crisis, as the whole continent seems to suffer from strikingly similar issues as a result of neoliberal policies.
We all have to fight very hard to eliminate neoliberalism in our continent, not only in Argentina.
Presidential election will be taking place this Sunday in Argentina, and it might be a historic day. The popular vote could transform the current political scenario in the country and bring a new alternative that creates hope for a better country and dignity for all Argentinians.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Our actions have an impact on the environment. It's our responsibility to change for the sake of our planet. Let's be part of this transition. Watch, preserve, and protect your Green Zone. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back to From the South. British police has asked for the help of the Vietnamese community in the United Kingdom and abroad to identify the 39 people found dead in the back of a truck on Wednesday. Authorities initially believed the dead were Chinese, but Beijing said the nationalities had not yet been confirmed. Meanwhile, several families in rural Vietnam are already mourning. A local priest said families told them they knew relatives were traveling to the UK at the time and had been unable to contact their loved ones. According to state statistics and anti-trafficking organizations, tens of thousands of people have left Vietnam's poorest provinces for work overseas so far this year. Syria and Russia have deployed extra troops to Syria's border with Turkey as a U.S. convoy heads towards Kurdish-held oil fields in northeastern Syria. The Syrian government started moving forces into northeastern Syria in mid-October following a Turkish assault on Kurdish militia in the area. This came after the United States withdrew the bulk of its forces from the area. This week, Turkey and Russia struck a deal in Sochi for more Kurdish forces to withdraw from their frontier on both sides of that Turkish-held area under the supervision of Russian and Syrian forces. Meanwhile, Turkey has vowed to continue with its operations in Syria if Turkish fighters did not withdraw as agreed. The Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has warned that if the Turkish militia fails to withdraw by the end of October 29th as agreed with Russia, the Turkish military will continue its onslaught.
The deadline is for 1 week. 150 hours. If the terrorists are not clear at the end of the 150 hours, we will take control and clean it ourselves.
At least 60 people have been killed across Iraq as anti-government demonstrations resumed after 3 weeks. According to reports, at least 52 people were killed on Friday night, while at least 8 people lost their life on Saturday, and more than 360 were injured. Demonstrators are calling on the government to address high unemployment rates, poor public services, and corruption. Earlier this month, over 150 people were killed by security forces in a confrontation. The South African LGBTQ community has celebrated the 30th anniversary of gay pride freedom in the country. The Johannesburg Pride Parade is the longest-running pride event on the African continent. During the march, a new flag inspired by the flags of all 54 African countries was presented. Organizers said the flag serves as a symbol for this year's theme, Pride of Africa. South Africa is one of the first African countries to legalize gay marriages.
I came here because I've always wanted to go to a pride, and it's just really nice seeing, like, you know, you vibe with your tribe, so it's really nice to see people of like who share the same interests all like coming to one place and enjoying themselves.
Australia's famous Uluru Rock is now off limits for climbers. From October 26, climbing the giant motholith is permanently banned. Uluru is sacred to its indigenous custodians, the Anangu people, who have been called for banning the climbing since 1985, when the park was returned to indigenous control. Various parts of Uluru also cannot be photographed or filmed, as they are considered sacred sites by the Anangu. The giant rock is a top tourist attraction in Australia. Just in 2019, nearly 400,000 visitors flocked the remote desert location near Alice Springs ahead of the October ban.
So when non-indigenous people come here, people that are not local to here, they can't perceive it at all. To them, it's just this big rock called Uluru. But for us, it holds so much of our understanding of life. In the creation ancestor stories and the creation ancestors themselves that are still there, and those that specifically belong to man's business. And we are really now feeling so happy that we can move forward into the future with a fresh start.
And those are the headlines. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.
Сейчас постараюсь сказать по-серьезному. Наверное, все-таки, наверное, развал Советского Союза.